There's an article that came out just yesterday from CNN, dated, again, October 5th, 2024, entitled, "Scientists Grow Mystery Tree from a 1,000-Year-Old Seed." Apparently back in the 80s, they were digging in the Judean desert and they found this seed. They hung on to it until 2010. 2010, they planted it. They'd taken all the measurements. They looked at everything they could. They planted it just to see what would happen. And wouldn't you know, 5 weeks later, a little sprout came out of the ground. Started to grow, and when they dated it, when they looked at it, they found that this seed was 1,000 years old. It marked back to 1000 AD. The article said, quote, "What's surprising in this story is that it was just a single seed, and to be able to have one chance for that to germinate is extremely lucky." Now, the reason that this was a story on CNN's website is that that sort of thing you wouldn't think would happen. And it just kind of brings all kinds of questions. What is alive in that seed for 1,000 years? Not doing anything, just waiting there. What is it about that little seed of life what activated it? What didn't activate it for so long that if anyone would have been looking in on that seed, they would have said, well, it's dead, and then they plant it and find out that it's not. And it just shows us that there's so much to be known about our world. There are so many mysteries we're still trying to discover. There's these weather patterns that meteorologists are trying to figure out. They've talked about an atmospheric river, and now they're talking about atmospheric lakes. And they said, we don't even know how these things form or why they pinch off and go off in different directions. There's just so much. We have so much data, and yet there's so much that we just don't know about weather. And that's evidenced by the devastation that Helene caused, because people just did not know that it was going to do what it did. In 2023, as they're exploring space, they found these fast radio bursts from 8 billion years ago. And the article says this: FRBs, or fast radio bursts, are mysterious. They are short bursts of radio waves that last mere milliseconds, yet in that short fraction of time, they can emit as much energy as our sun does in 30 years. Nobody knows what produces them. Often they are seen to go off randomly in the universe. Sometimes they're even seen to repeat, unquote. So there's so much about space that we don't know. Obviously, there's so much about space that we don't know. And then we look at us, and sociologists and political scientists are trying to work to predict models. Can we predict voting patterns? Can we see what's going to happen in the next election? Can we help candidates craft a campaign that's going to address the issues? There's so much that we just don't know. And the human heart is one of the toughest things to try to unravel. And Job is trying to do that for himself. He's trying to find out the answers. And if you've been with us throughout the book of Job, that's one of the big things that Job and his friends are trying to do, is to try to figure out why. What happened? Why did it happen? And how can maybe we prevent this from happening again? His three friends, you remember, have answers, but there seem to be all the wrong ones. Job is wrestling with, how do I know why? And he gave a pretty good defense. Remember, we talked about this last time in chapter 27, this matrix of bad things, bad consequences, and good people, or people that do good and people that do evil, and how those things turn out and why we think the way we think about all of that. We talked about that last time. And then chapter 28 is a very strange chapter. Even most commentators are like, this feels very different from what Job has said so far. He's not lamenting as much as he turns philosopher. And so this has a very different feel than the other ones do. So we're going to look at this idea of the mystery of God. So the first principle that Job lays down is that there are things in the earth hidden from us. So he starts speaking about rocks and various things that when we find them, we think, oh, that's cool. That shouldn't have happened. Oh, I found this rare piece of rock, and this is a mystery, where to find more of these, right? You see it, and you're like, well, how do I get more of these? And that's the mystery, isn't it? Verse 1, surely there is a vein for the silver and a place for gold where they find it. Iron is taken out of the earth, and brass is molten out of the stone. He setteth an end to darkness, and searcheth out all perfection, the stones of darkness and the shadow of death. The flood breaketh out from the inhabitant, even the waters forgotten of the foot. They are dried up, they are gone away from men. As for the earth, out of it cometh bread, and under it is turned up as it were fire. The stones of it are the place of sapphires, and it hath dust of gold. What he's saying is we've seen some patterns in verse number 1, this vein. And this is something that ancients have found out, that if you find one piece of gold, you're probably going to find more gold, because it seems to, just the way that it fell in layers, either because of the ark or because of lava flow, because we understand now, understanding the periodic table, that different metals and gases have different weights, and so things are going to kind of stratify a little bit. And so if you find a gold, you're probably going to find a lot of gold in this layer. There's this vein. Or if you're going to find silver, you're going to find it all in this one place, and you follow it back into the earth. And in verse 2, he says, miners go in to find it. Or verse 3, he says the miners will go in and they'll bring light to places that have never seen light before. And that's an interesting thing, is we're working on our site that a house is going to go into. These rocks I find these big boulders, and I'm pulling them out because I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I don't want them to just get buried in the ground again. But this is maybe the first time that these rocks have seen light, or maybe the first time since they were deposited here by some glacier passing through. I don't know, but this was buried however many feet underground, and now here it is out there in the sun. And this is what miners do. They go in there and they're uncovering all this stuff. But all of this is, there's just a recognition that there's a lot under the ground that's hidden from us. And again, this is true. Verse 4, what he's saying there, I think, is that when the miners go in and they try to find these places, then the water comes in and buries everything up again, so you can't go back into it. So there's this thing that even when we find some of these mysteries, they're gone again just as quickly. And again, this is true of gemstones. Hear what he's talking about in these verses, because they're precious, they're rare. The rarest gemstone is something called the painite. There are just a couple hundred in the whole world of this rare gem. The black opal is rare, and if you've ever Google later on, or Bing or whatever you use a search engine of your choice to look up a black opal, and it's an amazing stone. It's black, but it's got all these colors in it. It looks like the Northern Lights. It's an amazing little gem, but they're very, very rare. I read that one recently, just one of those stones sold for almost $800,000. So very, very rare things. And when we find these, we say, these are valuable. They're valuable because they're so rare. And Job says, we don't know where these things come from. The earth is always heaving and moving. Things that are on top sink down, and things that are below rise up. Farmers find rocks in their field every year because the frost pushes them up, and then things that were on the ground start to sink. And this whole thing is a bit of a mystery to us. Job then speaks in verses 7 and 8 of places that even animals haven't gone. Verse 7, there is a path which no fowl knoweth, and which the vulture's eye hath not seen. The lion's whelps have not trodden it, nor the fierce lion passed by it. There are places in the world, animals seem to know so much more than we do. Of course, we know a lot that animals don't either, but you understand that animals, they don't all see the way that we do. Some of them see in ultraviolet, or some of them see in infrared, and so they can smell things. They can see things, they can sense things that we can't. And some of that is just a mystery to us. And the animal kingdom, there are things that they don't know, we don't know. They're just mysteries that God has put in this world. And there are animals in every place that we can't be. There are animals way under the ground. There are animals way, way under the sea. There are animals in places that man has never trodden, mountain places. And you think, how does something like that even live here? And they're just all over, and it's a mystery to us. What he says is, there's a lot we don't know. I said this back in chapter 25. If you took all the books and all the knowledge of the world, it would still just be a little bit of all that God knows. And what he says in verses 9 through 11 is that God's the one that knows all of the stuff that is a mystery to us about the world. Verse 9, he putteth forth his hand upon the rock. He overturneth the mountains by the roots. He cutteth out rivers among the rocks, and his eye seeth every precious thing. He bindeth the floods from overflowing, and the thing that is hid bringeth he forth to light. God loves molding and moving, and he loves being involved in all of these things, and he likes bringing things into discovery. I read a little bit of an article about some of the arches, and it's a very sad thing, but some of the arches that formed out in Utah are now starting to crumble. And as they do, it just is totally breaking the mold of what people thought of how these arches, people assume these arches formed over millions of years, and then as soon as they collapse, it's like, well, maybe they formed a little sooner than that. Maybe there was some water involved, and it's like, And God loves to just be like, surprise, here I am. My fingerprints are everywhere, and all of your ideas about where all this came from. You know, everyone believed that the Big Bang and everything was moving far away from us, and then we got the Hubble telescope, and now we have the James Webb, and you look at space, and you're like, we just don't know what's going on. And it's like, exactly, you don't. You know, there are all these wonderful mysteries, and who knows all of it? God knows all of it. Now, it says that he moves mountains around like we do. He erodes mighty rocks and mountains, and we accept this, and we as Christians especially appreciate it. But it highlights about how much we don't know about creation. So, first of all, he says there are things in the earth that are just hidden from us. And I think all of us can say, yeah, there's a lot I don't know. You ever watch Jeopardy or some kind of quiz, and you're just like, man, there's so much I don't know. You listen to some podcast or watch some nature documentary, and like, there's just so much to know. I can't believe there's some guy out there that got his degree, and all he does is study like midget meerkats or something like that. And you're like, okay, there's just so much. Maybe you say I don't care, but maybe you're like, yeah, there's just a lot to know, and there's a lot that I don't know. And we can appreciate that, right? So that's the first principle. The second principle is that of all the things that are mysteries to us, of all the things, that must have been really funny. Of all the things that are mysteries to us, wisdom is one of the most elusive things. And so he says in verse 12, he turns the corner. He's talking about God moving mountains around and carving out rivers with his finger. And then he says in verse 12, but where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Look at verse 20. Whence then cometh wisdom? And where is the place of understanding? He says it twice. Of all the things that we can search for and look for, the thing that seems to be the most elusive is not painite or the black opal or where, fast radio bursts are coming from. The thing that we want more than anything but have a hard time finding is wisdom. That's what he's saying in this chapter. Wisdom, in this context, is the answer to our questions, I believe. The knowledge of what's really going on. All the questions that Job and his friends have been kind of bantering about, Job is just kind of sitting down with them, looking him in the eye and just saying, can we just admit that we don't know? Can we just admit that there's a lot that God's doing that we just don't know? That's not really going to stop us from asking, but it's at least enough for Job to say, let's not pretend that we have the answers. We don't know a lot about the world we're living in. And so let's just put wisdom in the category of all those things that we're still trying to find out stuff about. Again, through science, we have many answers to our previous mysteries, but the questions that we all have about suffering can't be answered by studying animal migration or discovering that Jupiter has more moons than we thought it did, or creating gems in a lab, or filling out questionnaires. We just can't find out the answers to the things we're really asking. Why did this happen? No one can tell you. Scientists can get grants and they can study it, and there's just no way for them to ever find out. We want to know, why did so-and-so get cancer? Why did so-and-so die in an accident? Why weren't more people saved from that hurricane? Why does man do this and it seems like God doesn't do anything about it? Those are the questions that people ask. And if we go to the places that have secrets, they don't have the answers to this one. Look at verse 12. He asks, where can we find wisdom? Look at verse 14. The depth saith, it's not in me. And the sea saith, it's not with me. I'm sorry, I don't have the answers to those questions. I can tell you a lot about a lot. There's some weird fish down there. And the depth says, yeah, I can tell you all about these things, but I can't tell you where wisdom is. I can't tell you how to find the answers to those questions. Even verse 22, look at verse 22. Destruction and death say, we have heard the fame thereof with our ears. Yeah, we've heard about this wisdom, but we don't know. And you say, what is death and destruction? So I looked at this passage and I was like, this is a tough one to kind of study out. I think Barnes probably has it right. He says this, quote, death is used here to denote Sheol, or the abode of the spirits of the dead. The sense is that those deep and dark regions had simply heard the distant report of wisdom, but they did not understand it, and that if one went down there, it would not be fully revealed to him. Perhaps there is an allusion to the natural expectation that if one could go down and converse with the dead, he could find out much more than he could be known on earth. It was to be presumed that they would understand much more about the unseen and future world and about the plans and government of God than man can know here, unquote. But of course, he's wrong. And again, you read any kind of Greek mythology and you find, people going into the depths and crossing Styx, and, they're going in and they're trying to find out the answers to all these things. And Job says, it's not there. It's not there. You're not going to be able to ask the oracle. You're not going to be able to ask, looking into the liver of the goose to try to find out the mysteries of the universe. But that's all the stuff that people want. I think that's why people start going to church. I can't tell you the number of people that have come into my office, the number of men that have come into my office crushed, asking questions. Can I tell you the number one reason they come in? They had a breakup. And they're just like, what do I do? My wife, my girlfriend, whatever it is, she can't stand me, and I got to make this right, and they're desperate to do something. And I always point them to the cross, because I always say your problem is not primarily this girl. Your problem is an idol problem. That's why you're here. You don't think about your soul until all of a sudden she's gone. That's a problem. And I'm glad that God gets their attention with that. I've been able to give the gospel to a lot of guys, but they're asking these questions that there aren't answers to. Right? Maybe some of these guys, the answer is, well, maybe don't do drugs. Maybe be a nicer guy. But for some of these guys, the point is they come to church because they're like, I don't have the answer. It must be someone who's in touch with God that can give me the answer. And that's right. I'm not the guy that has that kind of answer, but we all recognize if you're going to find the answer to these questions, it has to be through God, right? Because it's not in the deep, and it's not in the sea. Nature can't tell you. It's somewhere else. It's with God. Gems are great, but he says it doesn't compare to finding these answers. These answers are so sought after that if you had the answers to these questions, you'd be the richest man on earth. Look at verse 13. Man knoweth not the price thereof, neither is it found in the land of the living. Now let me just back up and read verses 12 and 13 together so it's a little bit of context. Where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man knoweth not the price thereof, neither is it found in the land of the living. The depth saith, it is not in me, and the sea saith, it is not with me. It cannot be gotten for gold, verse 15. Neither shall silver be weighed for the price thereof. It cannot be valued with the gold of Ophir, with the precious onyx, or with the sapphire. The gold and the crystal cannot equal it, and the exchange of it shall not be for jewels of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or of pearls, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The topaz of Ethiopia shall not equal it, neither shall it be valued with pure gold. Whence then cometh wisdom, and where is the place of understanding? Again, bracketed with these questions, where can you find wisdom? He says, man, if you knew where you could find wisdom, if you knew where you could find the answer to these questions, people would throw their gold and precious jewels at you, right? If you had the answer, if you had somehow the answer to these questions that everybody asks, you could do whatever you wanted. Man would say, yes, you're the one we're looking for. The U.S. government pays $30 to $45 billion annually through the National Institutes of Health for research. They're trying to find the answers to all these things. Now, if you read someone like Rand Paul, he always has kind of I think it's called the Festivus report or something, where he talks about all the dumb things that our government's spending money on, studying stalactites and things like this. How far is it dripping this year? All these things and all that's dumb, but it's in search of knowledge. We have to find the answers and the mysteries to the universe. The CERN over in Switzerland, they have this huge particle collider, and they put all these things in, and they just make those things spin around, and then they collide all these particles together, and they look at it for this one little thing that a boson that appears for just a millisecond, not even a millisecond, just a fraction of a second, and they see that, and they're like, oh, we've had a breakthrough. You know what they're looking for? They're looking for a theory of everything, and you know what they're looking for in that CERN? You know what they actually call it? They call it the God particle. It's the answer to all of life's questions. Right now, they're trying to figure out how do quantum physics and Newtonian physics go together, because they don't play well together. And they don't know. They just know that there's something that they can't understand. It's something about what God is doing. And they're like, if we knew the answer to that, man, we just unlock all of this. And God says, you're looking in the wrong place. You're looking in the right place when you say the God particle, but it's not the God particle. It's just God. Right? And you can't buy all these answers with money. You can't study it. You can't find it that way. Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, some of the wealthiest people on earth, and even all their wealth couldn't keep their marriages together, right? Because there's something else going on there. And they can't answer these questions either. It's frustrating when we can't find these answers. Look at verse 21. Seeing it is hid from the eyes of all living and kept close from the fowls of the air. We're all looking for it, but none of us can find it. And that's frustrating for us when we're looking for answers and we can't find them. There's these government inquiries. Hey, whatever happened with that Trump assassination? How was that guy just able to get that close? Oh, we'll probably not find an answer to it. Hey, how do you have the Dobbs decision leak from the Supreme Court of the United States? Don't they have a way to find out who did that? Apparently not. And that's really frustrating for us because it's like, you can't figure that out? You knew every single person that was on the steps in January 6th, but you can't figure out who leaked a Supreme Court decision? Okay. That's frustrating for us because there should be an answer and there's not. And that's true. That's why people, I think, are frustrated at God, because there has to be an answer. Like, why did this happen? There has to be an answer. And then there's no answer that comes. And that's why we've talked about this throughout the whole book of Job. That's why people say, there must be no God because he's not giving me the answer. Well, maybe he knows the answer and doesn't want to give it to you. Maybe there's a reason that you couldn't handle that answer, whatever it is. It comes closer to home when we say, I need answers. Now, all of this points to a purpose, because what he's going to say is that the answer is very personal. Now, we're going to come back to Job 28 in just a second, and I'm right at the end of my notes, so don't get nervous. But go over to Proverbs chapter 3, if you would. I'm going to put a little piece of paper here in Job, and over to Proverbs 3. Proverbs, of course, is a book all about wisdom. In fact, I've been calling these the poetic books, Job through Ecclesiastes, or Ecclesiasticus, or whatever we're calling it now. But in Proverbs 3, all these are called the wisdom literature, not just poetic. So here we are in Proverbs 3, and look at verse 13. Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that getteth understanding. For the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. She, wisdom personified, is now called a she. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things that thou canst desire are not to be compared unto her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone that retaineth her. The Lord by wisdom hath founded the earth, by understanding hath he established the heavens. By his knowledge the depths are broken up, and the clouds drop down the dew. Wisdom is personified as the one who can bring help. And in Proverbs we learn wisdom to fill in the cracks of daily life, of the what to do in this situation. And what he's saying to his son here in Proverbs is find wisdom, and that will help be the cement that keeps you together in all of the questions that you have in life. You think that you can be held together if you just had the answers, and the answer is That's not going to actually hold you because you can never get enough answers. There'll never be enough. With all the answers you have, you're just going to have more questions. Much, much better to put in between those rocks of life the cement of wisdom. Right? And I'm learning this. Amy and I both, we've been watching videos on how to build a house. And, you can watch the videos all you want, but it just doesn't compare to actually just doing it. I was a cabinet maker for years, and I know all the little tricks, not even all of them, but I know some tricks about putting them in and doing all that, and it just took some time to do it. Anybody can do what I do. Yeah, but it's going to take you a long time. There's just nothing like experience, right? I'm learning that out. There's something about knowing, and there's something, wisdom is a deeper level of that, right? Wisdom is a deeper level. So the answer, back to Job 28, is always, always personal. Man wants answers. And what we as Christians are always pointed to is not answers, but God. And if you're not satisfied with that, then you're not satisfied with the right thing. You say, why is this happening? And we say the answer is God, and that sounds like a Sunday school answer. God. But it's not. It's the right answer. What do I do about these questions that I have? Know that God's a good God, that he's a good father, that he cares about you and loves you, and that he's wise and knows what he's doing. How is that an answer? And Christians say, yeah, I get it. That's good. I like that. Verse number 23, God understandeth the way thereof, and he knoweth the place thereof. Right? He asks the question in verse 20, whence then cometh wisdom? Where's the place of understanding, seeing it is hid from the eyes of all the living and kept close from the fowls of the air? Death and destruction say, we have heard the fame thereof with our ears. Verse 23, the answer, God understandeth the way thereof, and he knoweth the place thereof. God knows. He knows all the secrets of nature. Verse 24, for he looketh to the ends of the earth and seeth unto the whole heaven. To make the weight for the winds, he weigheth the waters by measure. Do you know how heavy water is? Well, you could probably figure that out with science. Do you know how heavy all the waters in all the world is? God knows. To make, verse 26, when he made a decree for the rain and a way for the lightning of the thunder, then did he see it and declare it. He prepared it, yea, and searched it out. And unto man he said, actually, I want to save that for the very end here. But he says this, basically, God knows about the weather. He knows about the mountains. He picks them up and turns them around. He knows where all the little sapphires and gold is. He knows where every little bird is trotting on the ground. He knows where every lion is and every cell and every body and every electron in the whole universe. He knows where every bit of it is at any one time. And so he knows our answers too. The answers to the questions that you have, he knows those too. And he's not unwilling to share those answers with us, but he doesn't promise them to us. Right? Does God love to reveal? Absolutely. And we have a whole book of the Bible that's God revealing himself. God sometimes is pleased to answer those questions. Why did all this happen? And then sometimes you get to find out, and what a wonderful thing that God would reveal his answer to you. What he wants us to know is that he cares for us and that he's in control. And I don't know that you get the answers to why did this happen until you're willing to accept the person of God. Because it is true, I think, in my own life, and maybe I'm only speaking anecdotally, but I think I'm right, that when I have come to accept God and his character, then the answer comes later. I'm willing to accept the answer afterward. I don't know there's ever been where God has revealed what he's done if I'm not ready to accept him. Because if I'm not ready to accept that God might want to just glorify himself, or that God has a purpose for somebody unrelated to me in my suffering, or that there is good that might happen 50 years from now. We're in such a society where, no, I want there to be good right now. I want to know what it is. And I'll go through the tough thing if I know what the good thing that comes out of my suffering is right now. And God says, I'm not going to give that to you. But if you'll accept me, I'll give you some peace in this trial that you're going through. And that'll have to be a good enough answer for you. And Christians say, yeah, that'll be good enough for me. And unbelievers say, no, it'll never be good enough. And that's true. What God wants us to know is that it's happening for good reasons, and that we trust those good reasons are coming from a good heart, God's. Ultimately, it is how we see God that helps us come to an understanding for answers and not the answers themselves. Verse 28 ends this whole wonderful chapter about the mystery of God. Unto man he saith, Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. God, help us to have that kind of wisdom, to trust you and your purposes and your character, not looking for the answers, even though, Lord, sometimes you're pleased to give them to us, but looking to you, keeping our eyes on you, so that when and if you ever decide to give us the answer, we've already accepted you. And so, Lord, help us to do just that. Be with, Lord, our friends and our relatives who are not at this point yet ready to receive and accept you for who you are. Rather, Lord, they're still looking for answers and in sort of an indignant way. God, would you deliver them from that? Would you take them away from the lies of Satan so that they can accept you, fear you, and then have that wisdom? Lord, that's what we're looking for in us and in those we love as well. Lord, make us ministers of your grace through this. And please dismiss us with your blessing. In Jesus' name, amen.